Thank you to Helen for inviting me to speak today, and thanks for Nick for hosting us. So as Nick just said, my name's Donna Sherman and I'm the map curator at the University of Manchester Library. And I'm going to be co-delivering this presentation with my colleague Jamie. So Jamie's the Heritage Imaging Manager at the John Rylands Library in Manchester. So our presentation today kind of focuses on how advanced imaging techniques employed at the John Rylands Library at the University of Manchester have enabled us to kind of make discoveries about map production, with particular reference to two world maps in our collection. One of these is the Borgia or the Velletri map, which is a 15th century world map, and also the 1546 manuscript map assigned to French cartographer Pierre Desceliers. You may have seen these outside in the lobby kind of earlier on today. We're also going to be delving into the world of facsimiles and reproductions. So if you haven't had a chance to look at them already, do go and have a look at them at lunchtime. But this is also a story about the many lives which maps lead. So their initial production can tell us about the social, the political and the cultural environment in which they were produced. But their reproduction in both digital and analogue form contributes to the reinterpretation of these images, or these objects rather, often changing their significance and their meaning when encountered by new audiences. So I want to start with this quote by somebody called Colonel Dudley Mills. Mills donated his private collection to the University of Manchester in the 1930s. And in the introduction to his printed catalogue, Mills highlights the importance of old maps and their facsimile reproductions. And I just love that as far back as the 1930s, Mills is advocating for reading maps critically and recognising that the relevance of old maps and appreciating what they tell us about the human experience is perhaps more important than their technical or geographical accuracy. So you can see at the end there, the interest is more human than technical. We still use Mills's collection of historical facsimiles today. We use them in teaching. And in many scenarios, these are still better than your old mobile kind of screen or your laptop screen. Students love seeing the real, the real size reproductions and get a sense of the scale. In fact, my first encounter with the Desceliers map was, that Jamie's going to be talking about, was through Mills's collection of reproductions. I'd been working with the map collections for a good 3 or 4 years before I actually got to see the real thing in person, due to its size and its fragility. So just a little brief kind of introduction to map collection at the University of Manchester. And how we came to acquire the world maps that we're going to be looking at more closely today. So has anyone been to the John Rylands Library? Raise of hands. Oh, lovely. Excellent. So the John Rylands Library actually houses most of the University of Manchester Library's special collections. And it was actually founded by Henrietta Rylands in memory of her late husband. So John Rylands was one of Victorian England's most successful businessmen, having made his fortune in the textile industry. But it was his wife, Henrietta, who founded the library, and she commissioned architect Basil Champneys to build the neo-Gothic building which sits at the heart of the city centre of Manchester. She also dedicated the library to the public, and it opened to the public on the 1st of January 1900. Do come, if you haven't been, do come and visit. It's a gorgeous building adorned with dragons and stone corridors and stained glass windows and a really impressive Victorian reading room. But Henrietta Rylands also purchased 2 foundational collections for the library. In 1892, she purchased the Spencer collection, which was an incomparable collection of early printed books. including many rare atlases for those of you. I'm sure there's many of you interested in those here. She also purchased the Borgia map that we'll be looking at today in 1892, although that would remain in her private collection until 1903, when she gifted it to the library. In 1901, she purchased the Crawford collection, which was one of the largest and most significant private collections in Britain at that time, and which also included our 1546 Desceliers world map, which Jamie will be talking about in a little bit more detail later on. And then what maybe some people don't know is that the John Rylands Library actually merged with the University of Manchester Library in 1972. And meanwhile, the map collection at the University Library was growing. So the map collection at the University Library of Manchester was established, like many, within the Department of Geography. So that was established 1930. And it started to kind of grow and grow rapidly in the 50s, 60s as higher education was expanding, very much to support the teaching, learning, research needs of the geography department. And it was transferred to the University Library in 2007 when the Geography Department Library closed down, and it became part of our special collections in 2012, where it continues to flourish and grow as part of the library's special collections. So the copy of the Borgia map that we hold at the John Rylands Library is a printed copy of a metal map. When I say metal map, I don't mean a printing plate. I don't mean a copper printing plate. It was a one-off metal map, a unique piece of artwork, probably made from brass or iron. And the metal map was purchased by Cardinal Stefano Borgia around 1794 for his museum in Velletri, and it now resides in the Vatican Library in Rome. We don't know who made it, but it's dated to around the kind of early to mid 15th century, and is likely to originated from southern Germany. This large circular metal map was produced in two halves and riveted together. It was engraved and originally infilled with a black substance called niello. 37 holes pierce the map. I think you can see some of those here, which has kind of remained a mystery for many years. But I think the general conclusion now is that they would have originally held medallions, maybe representing cities or rulers. It's a curious map because, I'll show you here, it seems to use the style of medieval map making. So it's on a disc and it's surrounded by ocean, but there are a few differences. So it's orientated with south at the top. So we have Africa at the top, and we have Asia towards the left, and we have Europe kind of centre and bottom, and I think this is the UK just here. It's also not centred on Jerusalem like many medieval maps, and it doesn't appear to be theological in its approach either. It appears to be more didactic and instructional. It also documents historical events and ethnography, and appears to be based on travel accounts, such as those by Marco Polo. However, the map also depicts fantastic and mythological creatures, fabled races, and references to barbarism. Over 200 place names and narratives appear on the map, which reveal perceptions of foreignness and exoticism, especially in relation to cultures beyond Europe. So the further away you get from Europe, the more fanciful and colourful the descriptions appear. And the text is written in Latin, but the Gothic script is what indicates that this might be from South German origin, perhaps Bavarian. Some of the more colourful descriptions and less offensive include read some out. Here are golden mountains in which are vast deserts inhabited by innumerable snakes. Near Egypt, we have the phoenix, the sole most beautiful and solitary bird in the world, burns itself in an aromatic fire and in 3 days is recreated from its ashes. In this section here, we can see Europe. We can see a mythical griffin. We can see pagans fighting Christians. And one of my favourite bits, where's the stag? There he is. Yeah. And the text next to the stag reads, "The stag, when pressed by dogs, drinks water which it vomits upon them boiling." It's one of my favourites. I do like dogs. So the map was, I think, primarily intended as a decorative piece, an opportunity for metalsmiths to demonstrate their talent, rather than kind of advancing any scientific geographical knowledge. But it also presents us with a visual encyclopedia of the known world as it was perceived in the 15th century. It does give an indication of geography, but it also includes history, myths, cultures, and religions. It tells stories of the human experience, glory, conflict, spiritual beliefs, but also our connection with nature and the landscape. So, bear with me, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So we're going to talk now again about our printed copy of the metal map. So several years after Cardinal Borgia purchased the original metal map, he commissioned the production of printed facsimiles. And this was really for the purpose of dissemination and study, particularly in the arts and sciences. Recent research by Matthew Edney, I don't know if you're online, Matthew, but hello if you're there, suggests that a tracing or a drawing was made of the original map and then etched onto a copper plate. A number of printed facsimiles were probably produced from this copper plate and include an accompanying inscription beneath the map and the date 1797. So you can't quite make it out, but there's an inscription just below here, which talks about this map being a copy. And yeah, you can't quite make out the date, but it says 1797. Only 11 of these rare printed facsimiles have been recorded to date. You can see, yeah, this copy here is from the Library of Congress. However, documentation existed which indicated that our printed copy was in fact much older than the 1797 copies. Enrichetta Rylands purchased our copy in 1892 from the Italian bookseller and publisher Leo Olszki. And it's likely that Olszki acquired the map from collector and map historian Adolf Erik Nordenskjöld, who had come across the map in a shop in Venice. Sometime after purchasing the map, Nordenskjöld published an article in 1891, which was later reprinted in 1893, where he made a strong argument that the copy he obtained was in fact much older than the 1797 facsimiles commissioned by Cardinal Borgia. By this time, Nordenskjöld had parted with the map, and he was aware that it was now held by the John Rylands Library. In his article, Nordenskjöld claims the Rylands copy is a unique print, likely to have been produced at the same time as the metal map to inform the production process. This was a tempting argument, so we took a closer look. I think, excuse me, although, I'm going to go back one second. So even though you can see here our map's been cropped fairly close to the edge, we thought we would still see a little bit, a top of this inscription just kind of around here. if our map had been one of the facsimiles. So we removed the map from its frame. It was in a walnut frame. We examined it closely and a high-resolution digital copy was produced, along with a number of multispectral images. And this is what we found. So close examination revealed a significant area of paper loss at the bottom of the map here. And this is exactly where we would have seen evidence of the inscription, kind of just here. So this made us very suspicious. Meanwhile, our digitised version of our Borgia map, which was publicly available, had come to the attention of a collector and paper conservator in Malta, who had recently acquired one of the 1797 copies and wanted to compare his copy to ours. We supplied him with high resolution and multispectral images for comparison, and in return he shared a high resolution copy of his map with us. The similarities were compelling. Our copy was more than likely one of Cardinal Borgia's 18th century facsimiles. Recently, we were also able to supply advanced images to Matthew Edney for his research on the Borgia map and its facsimiles. If you want to know more about Matthew's adventures with the Borgia map, he talks about this in his blogs, Mapping as Process, which were created quite recently. So Edney's research revealed that previous theories on how the 1797 facsimiles was produced was also flawed. Up until this point, it was believed that an intermediate cast had been made directly from the metal map to make the printed copies. However, following a reinterpretation and retranslation of the 1797 inscription, Edney suggests that a more traditional printing plate was produced from tracings or copies made from the original. So a much more traditional method of copying the metal map, doing a drawing, engraving it on a copper plate and then printing the facsimiles from that. But during his archival research, Edney also came across an admission by Nordenskjöld that he was probably mistaken about the early dating of the Rylands Borgia map, having not previously been able to compare it to any of the 1797 copies prior to writing his article. So alas, this appears to confirm that our copy is indeed one of Cardinal Borgia's 1797 printed facsimiles. Since then, I've also looked at the copy in the American Museum in Bath, vainly hoping to get that tingling feeling or see something that would make me think, no, it is, it's different. Sadly not. But I'm not completely convinced until I've seen the physical copies side by side and perhaps some really good high resolution images of the other copies out there. It's hard doing kind of online comparisons. There's different degrees of detail when you look at online images of maps. You know, some are very high res, you can see the texture of the paper, but some you don't get that level of detail. So it can be quite limiting. Nonetheless, we still have a rare printed facsimile of an extraordinary map which enthralls our visitors and staff alike. It was recently exhibited in our New Treasures Gallery, where it received much attention. We've since photographed it again using the Selene system, which Jamie will talk about in a little bit more detail, and created a real-size reproduction which we can use in teaching and engagement sessions with the public. An enthusiastic member of our engagement team actually made an interactive, very basic interactive version of the map where he translated some of the text and shared that with visitors. So it'd be great to upscale that and have a really good, high quality interactive version with perhaps a more critical and inclusive interpretation of the narratives on the map, telling the wider story about its production. We'd also like to know, we'd like to kind of identify and locate and pin down those 11 other copies. We have an idea where they are, but we'd like to confirm that. Finally, I just wanted to kind of say that innovations in technology have always been instrumental to cartographic design and practice. Today we can make and share and use maps like never before. Creative mapping practices can also enable us to explore our relationship with space in new and more inclusive ways through lived experience, storytelling, memory, history, smell and sound, putting the human experience back into the map. As for old maps and their facsimiles, I'd like to revisit Mills's quote and argue that the interest in maps, both old and new, is both human and technical. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Jamie.
Donna's covered the majority of the history of the Rylands. What I did want to mention is that within the 126-year history of the collections being in Manchester, there's actually been an imaging service for around 116 of those years. We have a humongous collection of many thousands of glass plate negatives that have been photographed across those years. And if you notice up here in the centre, we have actually found a couple of the map that I'm going to be talking about. This is one of the older cameras we still have. We actually can still use this because we have an adapter to put our digital back onto this camera. So what one of our photographers has been able to do with the older technology and the new technology is go around the building and recreate some of the original photographs that were taken when the library very first opened. So pretty beautiful. And this is some notes from one of the governor's meetings, and there's some quite interesting sentences in here, but this bit at the end is really good. This new department is fraught with possibilities of worldwide benefit. So essentially, we've been doing the exact same job for 116 years. This is probably one of the first cameras that was purchased by the library for this type of work. This is a 12x10 plate camera. The items would sit underneath here. It's pretty much a basic copy stand setup. And over on the side here, this is some of the early library staffing. We think about 1954, using a microfilm style camera, photographing a Latin manuscript. And this is the room that we were actually based in until quite recently, when the library went through a £7.5 million refurbishment. So that's part of that. This is another glass plate from the collections, and this is the room that for many years the imaging team have coveted. So this, ironically, about the map which we'll go into, was the French Revolution collections that were held in the library. This is in the 1960s. This is what it looked like in 2023. You can see it's quite different. The plant room for the library is actually right underneath that floor. It was hot, it was stuffy, and you can see it's in quite a mess. So as part of that redevelopment, this space was given over to us. It was completely redeveloped. We were able to keep the wonderful parquet flooring. We had conferencing capabilities built in, and all of these bays set up around the outside. And the most important part of this is this big duct here. So we actually have environmental controls in that room that match the stores, which mean that items can be kept in the same conditions as they are when they're in the stores. So this is us now. This is the Celine that was mentioned earlier. So this is the photometric stereo system made by Factor Mate. We have the multispectral imaging bay at the back and various other bays where we can separate off and fully curtain off. But the most important part of that is we can actually pull those curtains back and have much more room, and we can work on much larger objects like the Mappamundi, for example. So as I said, I am very much not a map expert or a cartographer, but I have very much fallen in love with this map over the 19 years, if you can believe that I've been working at the John Rylands Library. So this is the bit where I need to stick to the script. So the title of the presentation and the title of my master's thesis is drawn from an imagined landmass along the map's most southern edge, which reads non de tout découverte, which translates to not at all discovered. So what I did in my thesis and what I'm going to talk about today is thinking about the biography of the map. And we can imagine, much like a person, distinct periods of the map's existence as different lives. So the first life of the map, French Renaissance cartography, flourished in an age of exploration, intellectual curiosity and royal patronage, especially under Francois I, who died just a year after this map was created in 1546. His court encouraged the collecting and making of geographical knowledge. These maps weren't just practical tools, they were symbols of prestige, power, scholarship, and a growing curiosity about the wider world. Very few navigational charts survive, if any, but these richly decorated atlases and wall maps that were commissioned for aristocratic homes and libraries certainly do. In the 16th century, the town of Dieppe became a major centre of mapmaking. Its cartographers blended new information from global voyages, much of it rooted in Portuguese experience, with classical geography. Pierre Desceliers, a leading figure of the Dieppe school, helped advance hydrography, combining mathematical accuracy with practical maritime knowledge. Maps like the 1546 example were not only geographical documents, but also imaginative ethnographic documents filled with mythical beasts, giants, and exotic peoples, much like the Borgia map. These features reflect contemporary European thought on human diversity and ethnographic perceptions. Humanist scholarship, drawn on classical antiquity, influenced cartographic practices by combining first-hand observation with imaginative texts, such as works by Marco Polo and the Travels of Sir John Mandeville. In this way, Renaissance cartography engaged with social and cultural questions, not just geographic representation. Renaissance cartography in this way explored cultural and philosophical questions as much as physical landscapes. Such maps also projected power. They helped assert territorial claims and supported emerging European colonial ambitions. This map embodies that shift, serving as a tool of knowledge, authority, and cultural expression at a pivotal moment in the history of cartography. So the map likely entered the French royal collection soon after its birth in 1546, though its exact whereabouts for many years have been undocumented. It was probably kept within the royal holdings, which gradually evolved from private collections into formal state institutions. During the French Revolution, royal and religious collections were seized and nationalised. The Bibliothèque du Roi became the Bibliothèque Nationale in 1790, and vast quantities of material were taken in as national property. But this period was incredibly chaotic. Items were moved quickly, often uncatalogued, and many were lost and dispersed. Such disruption created opportunities for private individuals and scholars to acquire overlooked materials. This is likely how the map eventually surfaced in the collection of Edmé François Jamard. So that brings us on to what I would have called the second life of the map, where it kind of marks the beginning of its re-emergence from a long dormancy into scholarly attention. Jamard was a French cartographer, scholar, and a veteran of Napoleon's Egyptian expedition, and he played a pivotal role in the discovery. As founder and curator of the geography department at the Bibliothèque Nationale in 1828, Jamard's task was to organise and catalogue geographical materials that had been scattered or neglected during the Revolutionary era. It is likely in this capacity that Jamard rediscovered the map. The exact circumstances, however, do remain unknown. One possibility is that Jamard found the map among the holdings of the Royal Library during its reorganisation, recognised its significance and retained it as part of his personal collection, either formally or informally. Another theory suggests that the map might never have reached the library after the Revolution and instead surfaced in private collections or at auction, where Jamard acquired it through his extensive network of antiquarians. Regardless of the precise route, it's clear Jamard viewed the Desceliers map as an object in need of rescue and scholarly attention. Whether it had languished uncatalogued in a corner of the royal collection or been held by another state institution, by the 1830s or 40s he must certainly have secured the map in his own possession. Jamard's ambitious project, Le Monument de Géographie, aimed to document and disseminate the world's significant cartographic heritage. Conceived in an era when cartographic knowledge was deeply intertwined with national pride and imperial ambition, it positioned France at the intellectual forefront of geographic and historical scholarship. For many of the map facsimiles included in Les Monuments, Jamard commissioned detailed hand-drawn lithographs by Eugene Rembielinsky. Despite Rembielinsky's reputation as a careful and fastidious lithographer, his reproductions introduced various discrepancies, whether artistic choices or just errors. Comparing the most recent digital imaging that we've produced with Rembielinsky's facsimile reveals several glaring omissions. The southernmost edge of the map is very much shortened and a prominent scale bar on Java Legrand is missing. closer examination of the figures, creatures and other artistic details on the map also reveal further differences. But most prominently missing is any notion of an erased description that features quite prominently in the top right of the original, which I'll talk about soon. Despite these inaccuracies, Jumard's facsimile had a substantial impact on the perception of the original. Even with the advent of digital facsimiles, the Jumard-Rembolinski lithograph remains invaluable. In 1862, before the ultimate completion of Les Monuments, Jumard passed away and his extensive library and collection were put up for auction shortly after. On the 4th of April 1864, an auction in Paris featured the Mappamundi as one of the highlights from Jumard's estate. Whether the price, 2,000 francs, was considered too high or the right buyer were unaware of its value, the map apparently failed to sell. It would be another decade before the map reappeared. So, the map resurfaced in what we could look at in its third life in 1874, and it was described as the work of an unknown cosmographer in an advertisement by the renowned London rare book dealer Bernard Quaritch, who, if you're not familiar with, is still ongoing and the library do still work with quite closely. So Bernard Quaritch had acquired it from an unnamed French source and then sold it to the 25th Earl of Crawford, bringing it into the Biblioteca Landesiana, which was the largest private library in Victorian Europe. At this point, the map underwent major interpretive shift. Originally created for horizontal display, it was remounted vertically using two long wooden poles, aligning it with modern north-up orientation. This dramatically changed how it was viewed. The text above the equator now sat upside down, and the map became less of a scholarly tool and more of an object of admiration. This display decision marked a turning point, firmly placing the map within 19th century intellectual culture. During Crawford's ownership, the map was displayed at his London residence on Grosvenor Square, rather than at Hay Hall near Wigan, where the actual library itself was held. The left side of the map, which we'll see soon, shows notably more deterioration, likely caused by polluted air, moisture and fluctuating humidity from being hung on a wall, most likely next to a window. When we removed the backing from the map recently, we found soot traces and water staining on the backside, which again pointed towards it being hung near a window. The weight of the poles that had been added, along with textiles intended for stabilisation, meant that structural stress was placed upon the map and it had unintentionally worsened its condition. Under Crawford's ownership, the map was made much more available to scholars. For a number of years from 1876, it was on deposit at the British Museum, where experts like Richard H. Major could study it alongside its 1550 and 1553 counterparts. You might have seen the amazing book by Chet Van Duzer, which the 1550 map is the subject of, called World for a King. Major was the curator of the map collection at the British Museum from 1844 to 1880, and he would have been the keeper of the map himself. However, fortuitously for us, as Quaritch noted in a letter to Crawford, want of funds prevents him from securing the Mappamundi directly for the British Museum, his annual grant having been run out. It was also at this time that the map was first attributed to Pierre Desceliers. Major wrote to Lord Quaritch, "I have examined the map, made in Arc, and as the authorship is a matter of interest in such case, I have the pleasure to be able to state with certainty," and see why that's not true soon, "that the author was the Reverend Pierre Desceliers and that the date 1546 is legible on the map itself. I have in my collection here a most superb map, much larger and in exquisitely good condition by the same hand, done in 1550, bearing Desceliers' name. The handiwork both in the script and the drawings is obviously identical." And then 4 years later, Major confirms in a rather self-aggrandising fashion his assumption in another letter to Lord Crawford, "On the map, but almost obliterated, in fact so obliterated that I don't imagine anyone but myself has made the discovery, is the legend to the effect, Facit à arc par Pierre Desceliers, Prebt," short for Prebstre priest, Lan, 1546. "Never in a lifetime could I have found it out were it not that I had recollected the very same legend, but with the date 1550 on a yet more beautiful map by the same hand in the British Museum." During this period, A second facsimile of the map was produced, commissioned by Lord Crawford, this time produced by the Autotype Company, which photographed the map on 12 by 10 glass plates to the sum of £105 for 15 plates and 100 prints of each, almost the cost of the map originally. Another notable event in the public, is the public display for the first and only time that we have found at the 6th International Geographical Congress in 1895. It was displayed alongside other maps, providing earlier discovery of Australia than is generally accepted in 1606. So the Biblioteca Lindesiana was ultimately then sold to Enriqueta Rylands and formed the majority of the collections in the library in 1901. I've just been given my 5-minute warning, so I need to hurry up. There's no evidence of exhibitions, loans or conservation during the map's early decades at the Rylands. However, in 1950, anthropologist and ethnographic writer C.A. Burland launched a new scholarly investigation. Working with the Rylands and photographic firm R.B. Fleming of London, he introduced UV photography to examine the quite illegible North American region of the map. This 1950 project marks a key moment in the map's third life, technology. It was now being used not only for preservation, but to support interpretation. Burland's work shifted the map from an antiquarian curiosity to a primary historical source, bridging material study, imagery and meaning in ways that foreshadow modern heritage science approaches. Which brings us to the map's fourth life, which, in my opinion, is the most dynamic phase of its life. This is when I come in. Before me, the map was photographed on 5:4 transparency film, hung between two sets of step ladders, which would not be a conservation technique used today. Those transparencies were digitized, scanned, and then available online via our digital platform Luna. 2011 is when I photographed it for the first time, and that was, at the time, high resolution, a Phase 1 P45 Plus with a 39 million pixel back. The map was on the floor in one room, and I was up on the gallery with the camera hanging over the side of the banister to get it in one shot. Couldn't fit it in anywhere else. We couldn't get the camera close enough to tile it, so that was the best we could do. In 2017, there was a full surface cleaning and a new custom flight case was produced specifically for the map with Tyvek padding. The case that it was in before was the original 19th century case, which kept it very tightly wound, which again was causing a lot of stress. And that then brings us up to the 2025 project in the new studio. So the new ultra-high resolution facsimile, which is available online, is now 552 megapixels, give or take. And that's 6 stitched images put together digitally. And we're carrying out multispectral imaging analysis, which I'll talk about in a second. We have also, as Donna mentioned, been using the facsimiles for collection encounters and public engagement. We have it outside, one version of it. This has proved exponentially useful. Bringing it out to the public has created a lot more interaction. Everybody just loves interacting with these printed maps. We find that there's people there for the duration of the sessions that we have. They're about 2 hours long usually, and people just stay, find new things. Every time I look at it, I find something new, which is amazing. We also have it on a large screen digitally, so people can then zoom even closer in. So, the 3 physical facsimile copies that I mentioned, the 1850s lithograph, there is one dog-eared copy for sale online for only €250,000 for those with deep pockets. The 1885 glass plate negative print, which we have the plates of. We also have the British Museum plates in the collection. British Library, I'm not sure if they know that we have those. And then the new 2025 digital print. So this is the nicer copy of the lithograph that's held in the Bibliothèque Nationale. Perhaps Jamad put this into the collection so he could keep the new one himself. Who knows? But as you can see, along here, the bottom is much shorter than in the original. This is where the erased inscription is, and there's lots of other kind of discrepancies. However, if you keep your eyes on Canada and that area, you'll see how worthwhile it is to use this facsimile compared to the other copies. This is the 1895 reproduction from the glass plate negatives. I mean, it obviously gives you a clearer indication of what it looks like. However, it's not very well exposed. It doesn't give you any colour information. And like I say, look at Canada now. And then this is the version that's online, the 552 megapixel version. Again, Canada, still quite dark. You can see the difference in the tone of the map as it goes over to the left there. And that's the side that we suspect was hung by the window. And this area here where there's an actual hole, this is where we found kind of traces of soot when we took the backing off. Kind of gone over that. I'm going to skip forward a little because I'm running out of time. This is some of the collection care interventions that we carried out. The wooden poles were removed. We found 104 of these incredibly cute little handmade tacks, one of which had this little curious piece of purple thread attached. This is the flight case that it doesn't currently reside in anymore, but this was the 2017 case that was produced. And this is the map in the conservation department having the backing and the cow-derived adhesive removed. Quickly on to the multispectral imaging analysis that we did then. This is the system that we use. It runs from 365 nanometers through the visible spectrum into near infrared in 940. That enables us to analyse pigments. It enables us to look at palimpsest material, recover lost and hidden material, burnt and damaged, water stained, faded, everything like that. So this is what the inscription looks like under normal standard light, and you can make out it does say Facite Arc Par and then 1546 by down here. So this area we thought was going to say Pierre Desceliers, but as you can see it doesn't. Facite Arc Par again, but it actually says Prebstre there, Old French for priest, Land de Gratz 1546, with a big gap in the centre there. So our analysis kind of points to the fact that Pierre Desceliers never actually ever signed this map. We don't know why. We don't know when this was erased, but the way it kind of feels to me is it was erased at the time of its production. I don't know why, but it just kind of strikes me because he never put his name to the map as he did in the 1550 and 1553 versions. It kind of strikes me, it kind of feels like a practice in a way. Another area that came out that we wanted to look a little bit more closely at was one of these fleur-de-lis crests. Now, the thing that originally pointed out that there might be something under there was this kind of shaggy line that almost looks like a lion's mane running around. That doesn't feature anywhere else on the map. So we perhaps thought a little lion's head might appear. But you can see the fleur-de-lis there. This is quite damaged. The edges are quite damaged. But you can see this trace of red pigment underneath. With a bit of multispectral imaging, a cross appeared, which we were not expecting, which appears to be a white cross on a red background. This is quite new. This is with a transmitted light sheet, which just brings the cross out a bit more clearly. But we've not really looked into this yet, other than I found the Duchy of Savoy used this flag as their emblem. So perhaps it could point to the map originally being intended for to be made for somebody else and not the French court. And this one might take a second to load, but one of the other things that we just had a quick go at is a bit of photogrammetry. So this is many hundreds of photographs of the map put together. You can see the light is bringing up the texture. When we remove the colour, you can see the full texture of the map there. You can see the 6 sections of vellum that it was produced on put together. This is quite low resolution. One of the things that we want to do next is scan the map with Factum Arte, as was mentioned earlier. We have the Selene system, which can do the scan. However, it's not big enough to fit the map under. So Factum are going to come back over, hopefully this year, to carry out scans with a bigger frame. Also, that then means that we could produce the most accurate facsimile copy, even using the same methods of scraping and preparation of the vellum as John Barrett here at Oxford has demonstrated on some of his manuscripts. You can see the tool marks on the vellum surface itself. We're hoping to put the map itself out on public display for the first time since 1895, alongside a new dedicated website with a digital exhibition. Maybe we can find out that contact for Milan to make us a case. That could be a good idea. And there's also plans for georeferencing, vectorization and text analysis, lifting the text off the map. So that's us. That's me. Thank you very much.
The first thing I was thinking of when I was sitting there listening to the pair of you was whether you would just open this up by saying what sort of response do you get from the public when you get to show them the work you've been doing? What's the reaction? How do they deal with it?
I think from my point of view, I don't think a lot of people realise what we do at the library. They know it's a special collections library, but they don't necessarily even know what's in it. So when we present these things, we get a huge amount of interest, especially, like I say, with the printed facsimile. People spend a lot of time engaging with it, walking around it, and then they go away, and we have actually had people then get back in touch with us about collection items and engage more with other items that we have online.
Yeah, I'm always really surprised at just how engaged people kind of still are, especially with the Borgia map, and they'll sit and look at it for like 20 minutes, half an hour. And in some cases, I've been getting quite interested in facsimiles and using facsimiles in teaching, and people are not, it's always nice to see the real thing, and you always want to see the real thing, but in most cases it's actually the content or the imagery that people are getting drawn in by, and being able to kind of take those around and show them to people kind of not in situ, if you like, has been really valuable for us. I think seeing things in kind of a real size kind of reproduction as well. A lot of the people that we're talking to, a lot of our students are used to seeing things on tiny screens, on tiny laptops, and they don't appreciate the artistry and the effort that went into creating such amazing kind of works of art.
I think also it's just how big these things are as well is something which certainly generates lots of interest, and people look, and a lot of people can look at the same thing at the same time and see different things, but it becomes a very shared experience. And I think that's a very exciting thing, just to watch members of the public enjoying what they're seeing and interacting with each other and responding to it. So that's for starters. I'm just taking a question here from the audience. Do waves, bulges, and movement in vellum produce challenges in scanning?
Yes.
Okay, that was easily answered. Could you give us one example of a huge challenge?
Particularly if we are doing the photometric stereo scan, the depth of the focus of the camera can be very shallow, down to kind of like 5mm. So anything that bulges over kind of a 5mm height will produce a softer image. So when we come to digitally stitch that back together, it can produce ghosting, it can produce all kinds of problems. So technically it needs to be as flat as it can possibly be.
Okay, that I imagine is quite a challenge.
It is, yeah, especially for something that's on 6 pieces of cowhide that's, stuck together and then gone through the life that this one has.
Fair enough, thank you. And one for Donna. Have you looked at the paper structure and watermarks in the paper of the 1797 print of the Borgia map?
Yes. We thought we saw a watermark when we did the multispectral imaging, didn't we? We did more kind of imaging and it wasn't a watermark. The watermark that exists on the 1797 copies actually sits on the right-hand side out of the frame, out of the circular frame of the map. And we saw that through a scan that the collector in Malta also sent us a scan he'd received from the copying Bibliothèque Nationale, and you could see the watermark at the side, but you could not see that on ours because it'd been cropped so closely. So we did look for comparison with watermarks, but it wasn't possible.
Just to say as well, usually when we're doing watermark imaging, we would use a transmitted light sheet to try and light through, but the map's mounted on card, isn't it? It's quite thick.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to get an image of a watermark if you can't transmit light through. There are ways to do it, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm carrying on vaguely in that vein. A question for Jamie. Do you feel the need to re-image as newer technology is available?
Yes. Again, like the more imaging we can do, the higher quality we can produce, the better the imaging that we can show. Like I said, for example, the image that had remained online up until 2025 was a 39 million pixel full image, which was, you could see the map in its entirety, but you couldn't zoom in, you couldn't see the details. The image that's on there now, you can zoom in to such a level that you can start to see the hair follicles of the vellum skin. So the more the technology progresses, the more we can show people, and the more we can let people see of that.
Thank you. This is a question, a tapestry-related one. Are there any other maps with Richard Hicks's imprint? Not that I'm aware of. And does Weston House feature prominently on, if at all, Christopher Saxton's maps? No, it doesn't. So, yeah, Saxton's maps tend to show the towns and villages, but I'm pretty sure Weston House does not feature prominently. In fact, does not feature at all. I need to check that one, but I don't think it does. Okay, another very technical one for probably for Jamie, actually. How do you decide how much to flatten an old map before scanning it? And what techniques are available to do this? How much permanent damage are you prepared to risk to get the best scan?
Absolutely none. So we work very closely with our collection care department. We would never put any glass on top of a map, especially the map like the Desceliers with lots of pigment. We will get the best image we can get without damaging or putting the map under any external pressure at all. The collection care department had relaxed the map quite significantly, even by the word, what I was trying to get at before as well when I was showing the new lab. Because of the conditions being the same as the stores, we were actually able to have the map out for 2 weeks and have it open. So it's usually rolled up and kept on the only place it would fit really in the library, in that long flight case. But for the first time it was left out for 2 weeks, and you could visibly see it day by day, just kind of relaxing down. And then when the collection care department took the poles off, again, it just kind of relaxed and became more comfortable. So we would never weigh anything down without collection care's input.
Okay.
It was as much a conservation project as it was a photography project.
Yeah.
You know, we did have more slides of collection care in there, but we had to kind of cut it down. But yeah, it was very much a conservation project as well, which is ongoing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Certainly an example here at the Bodleian, we, in our partnership with Factum, they produced a 3D scan of the Goth map of Britain. You may or may not be familiar with it, but it's a map which is on 2 skins of parchment and is very, very textured. And that 3D scan, the facsimile they've produced is 3D. So you can see all the contours on the map. And it is tactile. It's something you can touch as well, which is absolutely fantastic. So definitely something to look out for as a future thing working with Factum anyway.
I think as well, when you were saying before about people's reaction to these things, again with the facsimiles, they can point to places and they can touch, and that tactileness I think is really important, rather than seeing it under some glass. And you know, it's just a way of engaging with these objects.
I think it's just a great way, isn't it, to get maps into the public domain and get people actually wanting to be with maps and work with maps and look at maps and engage with maps. It's
because of the high resolution imaging that we've been able to produce as well. The print that's out there, we say facsimile, but it is just a representation, it's just a print. But we just did it through the university print shop and it cost 60 quid. So, you know, we're not precious about this version. This is one that, you know, you could see us printing a lot of these out and then being able to, you know, take them to schools, engage with higher education institutions, and then hopefully if it does go on display in the real item, then it's a draw for people to come in and see the real item.
Absolutely. I would strongly recommend for those of you who haven't been to have a look at this outside. It's an absolutely amazing thing. For all of you who are online, sorry.
We'll send you a copy.
Send you a digitized
version. No, so it's an absolutely fantastic thing. There's a question here. Why is the Oxfordshire tapestry so fragmented? Why are the deficits so regularly shaped? That's a great question, because when the tapestry map arrived here in the library in 1809, it looked pretty much the same. So it was damaged in situ at Weston House. I'm guessing the map had been folded at some point and was no longer on display, and so became much weaker. There are certainly parts of it where you can see there's a strong suspicion of insect or rodent damage. The map had been eaten. which is very sad, and obviously we'll never get that back. It doesn't survive anywhere. So straight lines, in a way, I think potentially help our project that we want to do. It makes it easier. So the 2 slides that I showed there were actually quite easy to put together, simply because we had straight lines rather than wiggly lines or big teeth marks in there. So
I was going to ask a question about that, actually.
Yeah, go on.
Because there's other parts that exist in other places. Do you think that they were cut out and taken? And do you think any might show up anywhere else?
Yeah, we don't think any more is going to show up anywhere else. We think we know where everything that survives is. But you never know. Excuse me. But yeah, there is a significant part of Gloucestershire in private hands, which we've seen and we know about. And there are odd little bits. We've got a few fragments dotted around in the library, which we actually was quite interesting when we were working with the National Trust. We thought they were fragments that belonged to the Gloucestershire map. And we had Oxfordshire laid out on this huge bench, and Cassini, who was in the photos, just looked at them and said, I think these are going to fit on the border round Oxfordshire. And within, 2 or 3 minutes, 5 of these little pieces of tapestry she'd found the right place for, and they just fitted in. And she just had the eye. So, yeah. These bits that are out there, but I don't think we're not expecting to find any more now. Yeah. So an online question here for Donna. There seems to be a considerable difference between cartographical conventions used in printed and tapestry. Oh no, that's for me. Sorry, there's one for Donna. You mentioned the rolls. I think. Oh, the holes could have had medallions. Are there any of these medallions that have survived?
Not that we're aware of. No.
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 And as a follow-up question, is there an obvious primary source or account that the illustrations and annotations are taken from on the Borgia map? Are there similarities with other maps in terms of its geography?
Okay, so the first one, so the account that we initially went to was Nordenskjold's account, because that seemed to be referencing the Rylands copy specifically. In that kind of article, Nordenskjold does includes some interpretations or translations of the text on the map, but I think he got it from the historian Heeren, who not quite sure when he translated the map, but it could have probably been maybe about 18th century, 19th century. Okay. But I can't remember the dates, but I have got it in my notes. So if that person is online, wants a more detailed answer, I can provide it at some point. But yeah, Nordenskjold seems to have got it from Heeren, who was a historian who'd analysed the map previously.
Okay, and is there, as kind of follow on, any evidence for people using the map and how they interpreted it? I mean, we've been alluding to the fact that people are looking at facsimiles and getting very excited nowadays.
Yeah. Do you mean in a modern sense or historically? So what we don't know is why the original metal map was made. We don't know who made it, and we don't know for sure why it was made, who it was made for. But because of its structure, because it was made on metal, it was probably made to be hung somewhere, made for an individual. Decorative, probably very expensive. The facsimiles that Cardinal Borgia commissioned were very much for the purpose of scholarship. It was also interesting that this was one of his most prized possessions in his collection, which kind of surprised me, given all the treasures he has. That kind of surprised me. And it was also very prized by Enriqueta Rylands as well. She kept it in her personal collection. But the facsimiles were made for another use. They were made for dissemination and scholarship. And this was quite common, I think, with other items in his collection. He would write articles, or he would make copies of them that they could be disseminated to be studied in more detail.
And do we know if there's any, if there's been any in-depth study doing, say, comparing the text on the Borgia map, say, compared to Hereford Mappamundi?
No, No. So again, you know, kind of events like this is like, you know, if someone out there and wants to do a little bit more research, then, you know, I think that'd be worthwhile, definitely.
Good stuff. Thank you, Donna. How are we doing for? Oh, we're bang on time. So I maybe if I just read one of these questions from online, are there any drafts for tapestry maps, or have they survived? I don't think they have, unfortunately. What I didn't say is there were the 4 tapestry maps that were created, and a couple more followed on maybe a couple of generations afterwards. So if anyone's been to the Ashmolean, you'll see there's a tapestry map of Oxfordshire there, which was commissioned by Sheldon's grandson. But since then, tapestry maps are very expensive things to make, and they don't appear to have caught on, which is rather sad, but then makes the tapestries we have here all the more exciting for people to look at. And actually that phone ringing is at perfect timing because it's 11:30 and we have a 15-minute break. So rather than take you away from your coffee and your chance to see the maps and other things on display, I'd like to thank you all for your contributions so far. Thanks to Donna and to Jamie, and we will reconvene here in 15 minutes. So please make your way. Thank you.